No question. What way things operated around there. Carol, though, let me ask you about the intel that filtered back to H.R. McMaster that officials from the UAE, China, Israel, and Mexico saw Kushner as a soft target, somebody that could be played because of his inexperience and also because of his financial difficulties. How solid is that intel? Is that just gossip? And again, I'm not suggesting that you're reporting gossip. You're reporting what the intel agencies, what they got. How solid do we know that information is?
Well, I think there's a lot to unpack there, Joe. And well, first off, we don't publish gossip.
Right. But, I understand. But I want to be clear, because I stated that inartfully. If if somebody from McMaster's office got information to you all, or if somebody from the White House got information from you all, you know, a lot of times they say, well, we saw this intel report that says these 4 countries think that Kushner's an easy play. I'm not saying you do publish gossip, but if you get a source in the White House telling you these things, I'm just wondering how solid that information is.
So it's a good question, and what I was going to say was that we know of at least 4 countries in which an issue was raised and a concern was raised inside the White House about the way in which foreign officials were discussing Jared Kushner's manipulability. It's a mouthful, but their view was, at least in their discussions privately that were picked up by U.S. intelligence community officials, they were viewing him as an easy mark, somebody that they could take advantage of and potentially trick or move in the direction that they wanted to move him. And I guess the reason that we take it so seriously is that it raised concerns inside the White House. And again, as we published in our story yesterday, it also is one of the reasons that the security clearance has been held up for Jared Kushner. You know, he's been operating on this interim clearance where he shouldn't have access to top secret information normally, but he has for a year. He's had an incredibly highly classified portfolio and access to secret code word programs. And in this instance, these concerns about these conversations were serious enough that it was one of the reasons that his clearance is stalled.
Mike.
Peter, in normal times, under a normal administration, we would be talking about Carol's story, the Post story, the Times stories, just single stories for 3 whole hours. But these are not normal times. We have every day a fire hydrant of stories. Recently, within the past 2 days, the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, dropped multiple numbers of charges against Rick Gates, including tax fraud charges, bank fraud charges. Seemingly, the purpose is to get more information to get Paul Manafort to cooperate with the special prosecutor. Where does that stand, and what is the meaning of all the charges that were dropped?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think we should probably ban the phrase "in normal times." I find myself using that phrase in the stories way too often, and I don't think it has any meaning anymore, because obviously these are, as you said,
Ford F-150.
Let's get after it.
I really don't see how he could do an effective job without top secret briefings.
He's doing a great job, and he's going to continue in his role.
4 countries were discussing that Jared Kushner might be vulnerable.
I think we might be seeing the end of Jared and Ivanka.
This is a broad claim of privilege that I don't think any court would sustain.
Hope Hicks apparently did admit that in representing Donald Trump, she occasionally had to tell white lies.
Was there been a subpoena issued for her?
No.
Should there be?
Yes.
How do you get back to preparing for the AP exam after you lost your friend?
And I think it's going to feel empty for a while.
We're going to come back as a class, and we're going to continue on.
Good morning. Welcome to your new day. Allison is back in Parkland, Florida this morning. A big day as the students go back to school. But here in New York, we're following several major Russia developments that are rocking the West Wing. CNN has learned special counsel Bob Mueller's team is investigating President Trump's business dealings with Russia prior to the 2016 campaign. Also, Chief of Staff John Kelly downgrading Jared Kushner's top secret security clearance. A bombshell report in the Washington Post says at least 4 countries discussed ways to manipulate Kushner by taking advantage of his lack of experience, financial troubles, and intricate business arrangements. Also, a source says White House Communications Director Hope Hicks admitted telling white lies for the president. Allison.
Are there kids?
Superintendent.
Oh, Chris, listen, it's very active right here, okay? We are 40 minutes away from class starting, and all sorts of things are happening on the ground outside of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. First of all, we watched as just a line of cars of teachers and staff members about an hour or half an hour ago just stretched for blocks coming in to this school for the first time in 2 weeks. That was poignant. And then we watched all of the police officers from all of the neighboring towns, from Hollywood, Florida, Broward County. We had Pembroke Pines. We had, I mean, just it seemed like a dozen police, different officers, towns coming here to show this solidarity with their police officers here and all of the students, and a huge show of force. And then what I guess I wasn't expecting, and I don't know why, a really emotional moment when we watched the school buses start arriving. Lines and lines of school buses with kids sitting in there, you know, coming back to their beloved high school, which, of course, for the past 2 weeks has been a crime scene. And we're just trying to figure out how they had the strength to get on those school buses and what they're going to do today. We have some pictures of students walking into the school with white roses. That's one of the symbols, obviously, of what they've lost here. And I don't know if you can see, but down the road, this is where the memorial was, all sorts of mementos put up on a wire fence. And there's just a huge show of strength of students and police officers that have gathered together down the street in front of that memorial, obviously to remember all of their friends. So it's just a very emotional morning, as you can imagine. And throughout the morning, we're going to be here talking to students and their parents about whether or not they do feel prepared to go back and how they plan to get through all of these emotional scars, and what they are going to do to further the national debate over gun violence. As you know, these kids have been leading the charge. They have been activated ever since this happened. We're going to be talking to the faces and the students who you have gotten to know best during these 2 weeks and how they're feeling today. So, Chris, there's a lot to cover this hour as we are here in Parkland, Florida.
Great, an important place to be. You've got this contrast of the struggle to get things back to normal, and then their hopes for change and to see what will be different. And that is an unanswered question at this point. But you're in the right place on the right day. Allison will be back with you in a second. We have all of these headlines covered for you. So let's begin with CNN's Abby Phillip live at the White House. You know, and again, Abby, we have not seen this much news come out of the investigation at once in a long time.
That's right. A lot of new developments overnight, especially as it relates to
CIS at Fort Myer. The base is located near the Pentagon, so it's a sensitive area. 11 people, including Marines, were sickened Tuesday, but they don't know what the substance was that was sent in this letter. 3 of those people were treated at the hospital for non-life-threatening conditions, but the problem is they don't know what it was, and you have 8 others who are suffering from itching and nasal irritation. One even had a bloody nose. The FBI is testing the substance at its lab in Quantico, Virginia. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is under scrutiny, and rightly so. 31 grand of your money on a new dining room set for the secretary, Ben Carson. This coming after a CNN report about a top HUD employee who says she was pressured by her former boss to find funds beyond the $5,000 legal limit to renovate Carson's office. Take a listen.
He told me again that $5,000 wasn't enough and that we needed to find more money for the project. And at that point I said, I can't do that because that is illegal.
That's Helen Foster. She alleges she was demoted after resisting that request. A HUD spokesman says the Carsons were not aware of the $31,000 purchase. All right. Now, let's get back to Parkland, Florida. Very important day there. The kids are going to go back to school. What's in their head? What's in their hearts? Allison Camerata on scene. Allison.
Chris, listen, the activity is really picking up behind me. There is a convoy of dozens and dozens of police vehicles that you can see driving by me right now. They're all heading in this direction, and there's a gathering of all sorts of motorcycle police officers, right there at the opening of the parking lot as students start bringing their cars here. So the police cars, the police vehicles, they're from all over the place. I mean, there's the Broward County, there's the Hollywood police that are driving right now. Pembroke Pines police are driving by right now. It is a huge show of force from police all over this region. Hollywood police right behind me. And we just watched as the teachers and staffers started showing up. A long line of cars stretching down the block here. They are first into this school. They are getting their classrooms ready for the 3,000 students who will be joining us. So I just can't tell you what show of strength is here behind me right now. But listen, one of the only bright spots in the 2 weeks since this massacre is that Stoneham Douglas High School won the state title in hockey. So in just the past 10 minutes, we've watched as dozens and dozens of police vehicles, easily 100, from all of the surrounding towns. I mean, I've watched as not only Broward County, but Hollywood, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Pembroke Pines. You can see all of them gathering here for this huge show of strength and force as these 3,000 kids for Marjory Stoneman Douglas go back to school today. And behind me, there's a huge cluster of police officers who are about to go across the crosswalk. I just can't tell you what a feeling of sort of solidarity it is with all of these surrounding towns coming to protect Stoneman Douglas and to show them how much they care about them. So it has been an unimaginably difficult 2 weeks here, obviously, for the community. But on Sunday, they had a bright spot when the high school boys ice hockey team pulled an upset victory and won the state title. So joining me now is Matthew Horowitz. He's a member of that hockey team, and his sister, Stephanie. Thank you both so much for being here. Before we get to your big win, Matthew, Stephanie, what is it like for you to see all of these police officers? Is it comforting or upsetting, or what is it like to go back into school with this situation?
I mean, it's definitely comforting to know we're safe, but just knowing why we're safe now is overwhelming, and I'm still fearful going back to school.
You're a freshman. You lost friends. You lost 2 friends?
5.
You lost 5 friends in this because it happened in the freshman unit. And so what are your feelings as in 1 hour from now you're inside there?
I don't know. I'm still in shock from everything that has happened, and going back into school, I'm just worried that it's going to happen again.
For sure. I don't blame you. I mean, of course, the emotional scars of all of this stay with us forever. Matthew, as we said, the one bright spot for everybody is that you won the title. So tell us about that moment.
It was exciting, and I felt like it was one of those Cinderella stories. Like, it was just a meant-to-be thing, and we were just happy to bring some joy back to the community, and we ended up putting the medals on the memorials in front of the school.
You did?
Yeah, so I think that was a good thing that we did.
Of course it was a good thing. Everybody was so excited. And so it was a Cinderella story because you guys were the underdogs, right?
Yeah, we were the 4th seed, and we beat the 1st seed in the semis, and then the 2nd seed in the championship.
Did you feel pressure to win because of everything that had happened and because your high school needs a win?
No, we didn't feel pressured. We just... we thought it was just like almost a meant-to-be thing, and more or less we just had a fun time, and it was a good stress reliever.
Totally. But I mean, did it feel like, because you were the underdogs, did it feel like you had some divine intervention?
Not really.
Yeah, it was just your skill.
Yeah, it was just us playing hockey.
That's really great. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling okay. Kind of excited actually to go back to school. I feel like we need to, and it's time, but it's still a little traumatizing.
It's overwhelming, right, to see all of this outside of your school. I mean, this is just supposed to be a high school. You're just supposed to be going in there, and to see all of this happening. You're a senior, so you want to get back in and get back at it. But for your sister, it's different.
Yeah, I don't know how she's going to do another 3 more years here. I don't understand that.
What's the answer to that?
You just got to do it. I love all the kids here, and I can't imagine switching schools or just going anywhere else. I still want to be with the people that experience this with me.
What have these 2 weeks been like? What have you two been doing during these 2 weeks?
Well, the first week was full of funerals. Day in, day out, it was just a funeral. And a lot of vigils. And then we went off to, it was just like a lot of hanging out with friends, just like everyone being together, coping. And then we went to States, so.
I mean, full of funerals. That's not something that any of us have in our vocabulary for a week. Are you getting counseling? Or are you, what is the therapy to get through this?
I went to grief counseling the first day. It was offered the day after everything happened, and I saw like 3 or 4 grief counselors, and it definitely helped a little, but just being with friends and being with my group of friends, where we lost one of our members of our friend group, just being with them has been the best therapy.
I understand. And you're going to have an opportunity to be all together today.
Yeah.
We wish you all strength, and we will check back in with you, obviously, as we have been doing every single day. It's going to be really hard, but you guys have shown just the rest of the country tremendous strength. Thank you both, Stephanie, Matthew, Horowitz. Thank you for being here.
Anytime.
Of course.
Okay, so Miami Heat star Dwayne Wade, as you know, he honored this Parkland shooting victim, and he hit a game winner in the process. So we have all of the details of that emotional moment in the Bleacher Report next.
This Friday,
from this day forward, you will become weapons of Russia.
Red Sparrow is smart, sexy, and shocking.
Looking into the before the 2016 campaign. Now remember, this was a red line for President Trump. He said, if Mueller looks into my money, my family's money, we have a problem. I don't know how this won't qualify. What will be his response? We may learn when he starts tweeting in moments. The president's son-in-law, another big headline, stripped of his top security clearance. All right, what does this all mean? Why did it happen? What does it mean going forward? We have CNN contributor and the former director of the Office of Government Ethics, Walter Shaub. It's good to have you, sir. You're the perfect guest for this morning. We have 2 things to unpack. We have what this means for Trump in terms of the special counsel looking into him and his money, and then we have Kushner. Let's start with Kushner. Kelly pulling the clearance, right move?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been such a strange situation to have so many people in the White House walking around with interim clearances and accessing very sensitive information. And of course, these are all the fruits of nepotism, because there's a sense that the White House has been reluctant to pull the trigger on denying clearances to people who shouldn't have clearances. We saw that with Rob Walker, the White House staffer accused of spousal abuse, because to deny their clearances would create a situation where it's hard to explain why you haven't denied Jared Kushner's clearance.
So it's all grows out of the Rob Porter situation, fine. And there's a lot of political undertones to this. You know, will Kelly survive moving on the family? Would he be able to do this if he didn't have the tacit approval of at least the president? Those are political questions. However, what happens now if the president says, Yeah, no, I got you have your process. I need Jared to do these things. I'll let him see classified information anyway. That's my call.
Well, I don't think we can rule out that'll happen, and I'm not sure we're going to know that'll happen, at least not unless somebody leaks that, because the president has the authority to do it. But, you know, the White House, or at least the executive office of the president, recently released a memo where they wrote, it's just because something is legal doesn't make it right. And I think that would be the case here if the president says, we're going to ignore all these security concerns and put very sensitive classified information in my son-in-law's hands because nepotism.
Or because, like everything else, I think this is a hoax, I think this is a witch hunt, and you'll probably never find out anyway. That last part is a very key component. Thank you for raising that, because if we don't find this out, we may never know. That's an important consideration. All right, now, in terms of what's happening with Trump. He didn't release his taxes. He's never opened the books on his businesses. So, did lack of transparency at least contribute, in your estimation, to these questions from the special counsel looking into his financial dealings even before the campaign?
I'd have a hard time believing that Robert Mueller is just on a fishing trip because he wants to see what he doesn't know. There had to have been some breadcrumbs that led him there. But it is also true to say that there's been a severe lack of transparency stemming from the president not releasing his tax returns the way every prior president in modern times has done. You also have to understand the limitations of the financial disclosure report he files, which my office reviewed, and in fact, I signed his financial disclosure report. That report doesn't require you to disclose business partners, business liabilities, ongoing projects, any of the kind of stuff that could give us a clue as to whether there are serious concerns in a security area because he's vulnerable to blackmail or to leveraging for financial reasons.
So when Trump and his people say he has provided more disclosure than anybody else in history, look at all this paper we let you guys see, you say quantity is not quality.
No, he's produced less information than his predecessors, at least since the enactment of the Ethics in Government Act, which set out the standards for financial disclosure. His financial disclosure report was compliant with the law, so I signed that. Of course, they asked to not have him have to sign it, and he'd have been the first person out of all of the millions of financial disclosure reports that have been filed to not certify that his report is true.
What are Schaub's big questions going forward?
Well, I think one of the glaring things just standing out there in plain sight is that the president has refused to enforce sanctions imposed by a bipartisan majority in Congress against Russia. And so Russia has faced no consequences as a result of their meddling in our election. And we heard yesterday that he hasn't directed anybody to really proactively go after an effort to stop it from happening again. So I think that raises legitimate questions about what are his links to Russia. Do they have something on him, whether it's financial leverage or embarrassing information? And I think that's absolutely fair game for Robert Mueller to look at.
All right, important insight. Walter, thank you for helping us understand these things better. You get these issues. You were there. You worked with them. Thank you very much. All right, another story for you this morning. What does this mean? $31,000 for an office dining room set. That is the price tag for HUD Secretary Ben Carson. Under scrutiny now because it's a lot of damn money. What's going on with that? Next.
Inside the Middle East, in association with MISC.
So joining me now are two of the Carly Novell. Great to see you guys this morning. Thank you so much for being with us before you head in. Samantha, let's just start with the physical wounds, okay, which I know are quite different than the emotional wounds that you all are. But you were shot twice.
Yes, I was.
Physically, how are you doing?
I got my staples removed, which is good, but the only bad thing is it's itchy, but that's the only problem for it, yeah.
And emotionally, how are you doing this morning?
I'm hesitant to walk into the building, but I know I have to start. I have to face it head on. At least that's just my approach. I have a lot of different feelings. I want to sleep. At the same time, I want to, I kind of want to get this over with. It's a bunch of bunch of feelings.
Well said. I mean, of course, you're all over the place because there's no playbook for this, for what the right way to enter this school is. Again, Carly, how are you feeling this morning?
I'm nervous. I feel the same as her. I'm really scared to go in, but I know we have to go. And
I mean, you don't really. I'm talking to some students who have decided not to go back today. They don't know if they can go back. Do you feel that you have to go?
I think I want to go back at the same time as all my friends. I don't want to go in there for the first time alone. Even though I won't be alone, I want to start the same way that my friends do.
Yeah.
And what do you think is going to happen in there, Samantha?
Well, I don't think there's going to be much teaching. I think everyone's just going to, be happy to see each other, especially since we're starting off in the class that everything happened in.
I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
You are going right back into the class where you were when you were shot.
Well, not in the class, because that building is...
the whole freshman wing has been closed off, and nobody will be going back there. The windows have been taped over. The whole building has been closed off. But you mean you're going back into the same sort of class period that you were?
Exactly.
With the same people. And what's the thinking about that?
Well, I have a lot of feelings about that, because that class was a class where my friend was. And
you lost your best friend.
Yes, I did, yeah.
And how do you plan to cope with that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just going to see how I end up dealing with it. As I said before, I'm kind of nervous about going into the whole situation, but I don't know how I'm going to feel, to be honest.
Of course you're nervous. I mean, there will be a void of 17 people, even obviously, not just 17 people and random classmates, your best friend. And, that's kind of forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Carly, you had said that you don't want Marjory Stoneman Douglas to be remembered as the school that had the shooting. So how do you want it to be remembered?
I want it to be remembered as a school that changed something. I don't want it to be just another one. And the other ones weren't just other ones for the people that were there, but for the rest of the people in this country, everyone kind of forgot. And I don't want this to be forgotten, because something needs to change.
You all have done a great job of keeping it on our radar, keeping it front and center in the country because of the conversation that you've started. So let me bounce a couple of things off of you, because your state, the state legislature, is now considering a $67 million initiative to train and arm teachers, 10 in each school. How do you feel about that?
I don't think the teachers want to do that. I don't feel comfortable with teachers having guns. I think that law enforcement should have guns, but I don't think teachers need to have them. And I don't think we have enough money for that either. Education already doesn't have enough money, so we shouldn't be putting that towards arming our teachers.
After 2 weeks and after what you've gone through these past 2 weeks, what do you think? What do you want to see happen? What is the next step?
I want to see gun legislation. I don't want to see teachers having guns. That's just like a bailout. It doesn't do anything. I want actual things to happen. I want the age to be raised to 21. I want us to not be able to get AR-15s anymore. And that arming teachers doesn't do anything about that.
I know that you tweeted out that you want the school to be known as the school that started a revolution. Mm-hmm. And do you feel that way? Do you feel that you all will be leading the charge?
I hope so. I think the march is a great start. I think things are looking like they're starting to happen, but I don't know that it will until I actually see change, I think.
I mean, you'll obviously have to keep your foot on the pedal if you want this, and it will be hard. You have to go back to school now.
The past few days have been really hard to keep talking about things, because you just want to sit back and relax, and it's hard not to do that.
I get it. Samantha, what do you want to see happen now?
I just want to at least have a feeling of being safe. I know, at the moment, yes, I'm going through trauma, but other students, other people in class, I don't exactly know what the road is to get there, but when you walk into a classroom, no one should have looked there and okay, where's my escape route? No one should ever have to do that. I've done that multiple times, not only since the shooting, but even previously because of shootings that have occurred. I mean, either gun legislation, strengthening background checks, whatever it may take, I just want people to feel safe going into a place. I mean, yes, things happen, but going into a place and not really having to worry, especially school, where we go every single day.
You deserve that. You deserve to feel safe in your school. Well, we'll be watching. Thank you both so much for stopping by. We're thinking of you both, and we'll talk again. Chris, they deserve to feel safe, and that's what the feeling is here about how they will be able to do that today.
All right, Allison, an important place to be on a very important day for those kids and for the country. We have another big story this morning as well, a major development in the Russia investigation, actually several. But one key question is whether President Trump's lack of transparency led special counsel Bob Mueller to dig deeper into his business dealings. How does that work? We'll tell you next.
I'm CNN meteorologist Allison Chinchar, and this weather.
He's a valued member of the team, and he will continue.
We're getting this blurring of behavior in his private and public roles.
We're going to take it as it comes along every single day.
You're going to feel the presence of emptiness.
We're more connected than ever. I don't think anything's ever going to change this.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. This is your new day. It is Wednesday, February 28th, 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. I am in New York. Allison is back in Parkland, Florida. A very important day there. We're going to check in 1 second. But here's our starting line. We've had several major Russia revelations rocking the West Wing. CNN has learned special counsel Bob Mueller's team is investigating President Trump's business dealings with Russia, the key part before the 2016 campaign. Also, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly stripping the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, of his top secret security clearance. A bombshell report in the Washington Post says that at least 4 countries discussed ways to manipulate Kushner by taking advantage of his lack of experience, financial troubles, and intricate business arrangements. And a source tells CNN the president's communications director, Hope Hicks, admitting to House investigators she has had to tell white lies for the president. But a top Democrat says Hicks refused to discuss her role in drafting a misleading statement about that 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians. Allison.
Okay, so Chris, I am back here in Parkland, Florida. I am outside of Douglas High School that you can see over my shoulder, as well as a huge police presence, because it was exactly 2 weeks ago today that gunman turned Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School into a war zone. So just 1 hour and a half from now, students will return to class for the first time since then. But of course, they will be without 17 of their friends and teachers who were killed during that massacre. So throughout the morning here, we will be speaking to those students and their parents about whether they feel prepared to go back, how they're emotionally preparing, and of course, what they want to see happen next in the national debate over gun violence that they have sparked since this massacre. Legislators here in Florida are moving towards trying to figure this out. Their plan is to arm teachers. They want to appropriate millions of dollars to do so. Meanwhile, efforts in Congress do not seem to be moving as quickly. So, Chris, some of the students are already here to talk to us, and we'll be bringing you that all morning.
Important place to be. Thank you for being there for us. We'll be back with you in a second. We have all this covered this morning. Let's begin with CNN's Abby Phillip live at the White House. A lot of headlines that they cannot like.
That's right, Chris. We are learning some new information this morning about the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and also the Russia investigation. The special counsel probe appears to be looking into issues beyond the 2016 election, including the reasons behind Mr. Trump's decision to run for president in 2016. Multiple sources tell CNN that investigators for special counsel Robert Mueller have been asking witnesses about Mr. Trump's business dealings in Russia before the 2016 campaign as he considered a run for the presidency.
I have no deals there. I have no anything. I have no investments in Russia. None whatsoever.
Sources say questions from investigators include the timing of Mr. Trump's decision to run for president, any potentially compromising information the Russians may have had about him, and why efforts to brand a Trump tower in Moscow fell through. Mueller's team also focusing on the financing of the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow.
Mueller was looking at your finances, your family's finances unrelated to Russia. Is that a red line?
Would that be a breach of what his actual...
I would say yes. Yeah, I would say yes.
The Russia probe gaining steam as the political futures of President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner remains uncertain. The Washington Post reporting that foreign officials from at least 4 countries have discussed ways to manipulate Kushner by taking advantage of his complex business arrangements, financial difficulties, and lack of foreign policy experience. The Post also reporting that White House officials were concerned Kushner was naive and being tricked in conversations with foreign leaders.
Jared Kushner was also having his own conversations with foreign officials, with people in other countries, and was not reporting those in the normal channels to White House officials.
The story came hours after news that Kushner's top-secret clearance was downgraded after months of delays in completing his background check.
For him to be the person who's carrying forward an important peace plan in the Middle East at the same time that he lacks a top security clearance, I just don't think that's workable.
He's a valued member of the team, and he will continue to do the important work that he's been doing since he started in the administration.
One of President Trump's closest aides, White House Communications Director Hope Hicks, also under scrutiny. A source tells CNN that Hicks admitted during more than 8 hours of testimony before a House panel that she's had to tell white lies for the president, but says she has not lied about substantive issues. Committee members say Hicks would not answer questions about her time in the White House or her role in drafting a misleading statement about Donald Trump Jr.'s 2016 meeting with Russians promising dirt on Hillary Clinton. Democrats on the committee demanding more transparency.
With anyone who doesn't answer questions, they ought to be subpoenaed.
This is not executive privilege. This is executive stonewalling.
Well, Chris, all of this is happening as the threat of Russian election interference remains very real. Just this week, the outgoing head of the National Security Agency made it clear that President Trump has not given intelligence officials the authority to disrupt Russian hacking at its source, despite the threat that is posed to the 2018 election just this year. Chris.
Abby, what a morning of news. On any other day, all of these, like 4 separate headlines, would dominate coverage. Today, we have to balance all of them. Thank you very much for getting us started. Let's bring in our best. We got CNN political analysts David Gregory and John Avlon. Am I wrong? Mike Rogers says, no, the president has never asked me to go directly at Russia to do anything about the cyber threat. Hope Hicks says, no, I'm not going to answer these questions, even though I came in under the intentions of being open. Jared Kushner having his clearance stripped by Kelly and what that must mean politically in the House. And then, of course, let's start with this one. David Gregory. Donald Trump said as president, if this guy, Mueller, goes after my money, that's too far. I don't know how this isn't crossing that line. If Bob Mueller is not just looking into financial transactions, but back before the 2016 campaign, who was he doing money with, what it could mean, what does that mean?
But that's the essential question for investigators. I mean, you have to ask yourself, if there's a fact, right, that Russia interfered in our election, wanted to sway the election, don't know if they did, but they wanted to do it. You have a president who has not responded, who has not defended America and stood up for our election system. Why not? What, you know, does he?
So you say fair play to look back there, look at the money.
It's fair play. I think there's no question that anybody looking at this thinks the greatest area of vulnerability is a potential financial entanglement that somehow means that the Russians have something on President Trump. Now, that may just be speculation, but how, in a long history of involvement in Russia and around the world, do you not look at that as an investigator when you have this event that happens around this candidate?
Now, John, fair point. Trump brought some of this on himself by not releasing his taxes, not opening the books of his business in a meaningful way. So it does fuel some speculation. Still, this will rub people the wrong way who support the president, saying, oh, all the way back then you're looking? I mean, how far are you going to go? Is this another Ken Starr looking to Bill Clinton?
At the time, they were probably defending Ken Starr if they've been consistent partisans. But the point is that you got to find the roots of the question of whether the president's compromised, because there are a couple of core points you got to figure out. First of all, how come in a world full of people Donald Trump will attack at the slightest provocation, will he never and has never said a bad word about Vladimir Putin from the campaign to the presidency? The second thing is what Mike Rogers said yesterday, in his testimony, basically saying that not only has the president never ordered him to retaliate or push back on Russia, but that Putin believes he's got free rein because he won't get a pushback. That raises it from a question of being compromised in the political and personal context to national security. So follow the money, folks. It's basic. It's going to happen. It's appropriate.
And then if you're going to follow the momentum, if it is true that the chief of staff withdrew the clearance from Jared Kushner, how does he stay in the White House?
I think it's very hard. Look, you have to ask, what has Jared Kushner accomplished in the White House? What role is he serving other than, first of all, I think it's a huge problem. You start bringing in your children, right? This is nepotism.
What would give you that idea?
Yeah, right. So that should be on its face a huge problem. And look, the president, if this is somebody the president trusts, but the question is still, what is he doing? I mean, what has he done of value and substance that's helping other than distract and have huge, judgment decisions that are suspect
and maybe make vulnerable with this other development that other countries were sizing him up as an opportunity because of vulnerability.
Right. I mean, you have to ask how long he can be in this role without a security clearance. What he's got to do, he's going to do Mideast peace. He's going to deal with Mexico over, a lot of tough issues with Mexico. I think it's a real blow for him. When the president said, my chief of staff will make the right decision, he's dealing with his son-in-law. And by the way, if Kelly could not have made this decision, then we would have really seen how compromised they were, because that means he would be untouchable.
But this is fascinating, because one of the core rules in politics is you never fight the family and win. In this case, Kelly seems to be winning this fight. And it's also, when Kelly floated the idea the top security clearance was going to be removed, he said, look, Jared's doing great work on the Middle East, on Mexico. But what did we find out yesterday from the Washington Post report? That Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Mexico and China have all been talking about how they think they can roll and apply pressure to Kushner because of his financial dealings.
Right. Now, of course,
that's a big deal
because of the Rob Porter situation and what they didn't know about him in vetting. So this is on them. This wasn't foisted upon them. This is something that happened organically from their mismanagement within their own. But how do we know for sure that Kelly is having the upper hand here? How do we know that this doesn't come out, removes it? The president can, in his own capacity as executive, say, I'm going to let Kushner see this stuff anyway. It's my decision. I say he can see it.
We don't
and
know that.
You went after my family, you're gone.
Yeah, possible. Yeah, and I think that's possible. I don't think the president wants that fight with John Kelly right now. I think if he really wanted it, he could have taken him out when he got pretty hot and was getting a lot of arrows his way about the handling of Rob Porter. I think we have to say something too amid these revelations that is an explanation. Still, there's a lot here to look at that seems to make sense. Mueller's got to prove it. He's got to prove something big, that the candidate for the presidency was compromised, and that he's compromised by a foreign leader, and that he made decisions to work with the guy. I think we have to remember Jared Kushner is a blank slate. He's got all these business dealings, and anybody would look at him and say, first of all, who brings in his son-in-law who's got no experience to write some of these most important
with $1 billion debt?
But a key distinction you're drawing that we try to remind people on a regular basis, although it is getting a little conflated. One is criminality, potential indictments, or
political malpractice
and naivete.
Well, and that's down here. That's what I'm saying is that people could look at anybody and say, you know what, this guy's a blank slate. I might be able to manipulate. In other words, you could see this story being written about almost anybody that has nothing to do with whether anybody did anything wrong.
Understood. All I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you may have, well, forget about bringing in the best. Forget about cleaning up the swamp. They don't know how to run this White House, and they have done things that are shady/stupid, but those aren't necessarily crimes.
None of those things are illegal. You can have incompetence and not criminality, obviously.
And they could mean something to a motivated Congress.
Right.
But they don't have the votes here right
But
now.
against the backdrop of only the best people, against West Wing running allegedly like a well-oiled machine, this is self-evidently chaos and Kremlinology. There are people fighting against each other in this West Wing, bleeding into the public.
Right.
And even between the chief of staff allegedly against, the son-in-law and the daughter. We had the communications director yesterday testifying on Capitol Hill, Hope Hicks, admitting, among other things, first of all, refusing allegedly to answer any questions about the transition of the White House without invoking executive privilege, and also admitting that she white lies for the president all the time, which is sort of the daintiest lie, but it's still a lie.
Is white lies a verb? I white lie?
I white lie. You white lie?
I go to you as a source. Yeah. What is the implication? Obviously, look, you have a little bit of a weird legal/political vibe with she won't answer questions. Well, that's going to be up to how the committee wants to exercise their jurisdiction and their purview here. So she didn't do it. It was without penalty as far as we know. But what do you make of the admission that, yeah, we told some white lies? We don't know about what. Was it about, we've never heard of any of our people meeting with Russians? We don't know anything about communications. Were those the white lies?
I mean, any of us who are parents, I think, tell our children, if you're willing to lie about small stuff, how do we know you won't lie about the big stuff? And that's why there's a criminal investigation going on. And by the way, let's also remember what the meat of this story is. The campaign manager for Donald Trump has been indicted because of fraud, and we know he has extensive ties with Russia and their puppets in Ukraine. These are big questions when you have financial entanglements with any country, including Russia, that raises the prospect of being compromised. You don't see this in electoral politics very often, which is why we have to keep our eye on the ball and look at these as important developments across the board.
None of this is normal, so let's not normalize it. Let's focus on the facts.
Understood. Gentlemen, could not cover more in less time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Allison, as you know, you're in the right place this morning, but I needed you here. We have not seen this many headlines come out of this investigation at one time in a long time.
No, it's a big news day, as we often say, but today seems particularly so. But I am here, Chris, in Parkland, Florida, because about an hour from now, the sidewalks that you see behind me, the parking lot, will be filled with the 3,000 students returning to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School for the first time since that gunman killed 17 of their friends and teachers. And CNN's Diane Gallagher has been covering this. She joins me here in Parkland, Florida. What are we expecting today?
I think they're not really sure. I even talked to teachers, Allison, who said that right now they just kind of want to all be together. The word that I heard most from students was apprehension. They're a little nervous about coming back, but they want to be there with all of their classmates. They want to try to return to normal, whatever that means. The principal said that today is about comfort, not curriculum.
First time walking through the red gates, hearing the bells ring, there's going to be a dramatic shift in the hallway. Like, you're going to feel the presence of emptiness.
Thousands of students returning for the first time to a campus that just 2 weeks ago they ran away from in terror.
We've seen what the end of the world looks like for 17 people.
Our grades aren't as important as they used to be to us anymore. Our lives and the lives of our friends are what takes priority over that now.
And while some are ready,
I guess there's a certain feeling of, relief that I am going back to school, that, we are going to return to normality and stuff like that.
Others aren't quite sure.
How do you even begin to comprehend all the empty desks and all the friends people lost and everything else? How do you return to normalcy after that?
Teachers like Darren Levine also unsure about what to expect.
There's no playbook for this. There shouldn't be a playbook for this. And we're going to take it as it comes along every single day.
The school reopening as law enforcement sources tell CNN the massacre's death toll could have been even higher. The killer still had 180 rounds when he dropped his rifle and slipped out the building, blending in with the fleeing students. And investigators say that hurricane-proof glass the killer failed to break may have prevented him from using a third-floor window as a sniper's perch. Now this week, the schedule is shorter. Students cannot bring backpacks and security will be, quote, at an all-time high.
I know I'm going to have a lot of friends there and my parents are going to be there, so I'm comfortable going back in. But there's always going to be like that sense of anxiety surrounding the school just because it was a place of a school shooting.
Preventing other school shootings, now a rallying cry for much of the Stoneman Douglas student body. But Wednesday, for at least half a day, the focus is here.
We're going to come back as a class, and we're going to continue on.
We're more connected than ever, obviously, and I don't think anything's ever going to change this. You know, we're going to be a brotherhood till the day we die.
And those students are actually going to be returning back to the classrooms they were in when that shooting happened 2 weeks ago today. Allison, I talked to one of the teachers, the teacher there in that story, Mr. Levine. We asked, what is he going to say when that bell rings at 7:40? He said, I got chills just thinking about it. I don't know yet. I'm not going to share it with you guys. I want to talk to the kids first. But he goes, looking at the way the past 2 weeks have gone, I'm sure that they will share it with all of you immediately. These kids have found their voices. The teachers are supportive, and they're hoping that that activism, as well as being together again, is going to help them get through what's going to be a very difficult day.
Absolutely. But they do seem activated, and that's what's gotten them through these past 2 weeks. So thank you for sharing your talks with all of them with us. And Chris, we should just let you know there are some students who are not ready to go back, who say that they can't imagine going back into, as Diane just said, what they call a crime scene. So we'll be speaking to them also. We're also going to be, in a moment, meeting two students, one of whom was shot, how they're coping today with their emotional and physical wounds as they prepare to go to class today.